Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Really, these are the same vaccines.
BC running out of Pfizer supply, what it means and how Moderna will pick up the slack. Also,
if you're calling to report noise from a helicopter, no permits were granted by the City of Vancouver.
an undesired early morning wake up, why a helicopter and a flying car are causing an uproar. And
this backpack helps us treat people better and to make them feel like they belong.
how students in Abbotsford set the stage for anti-racism in the rest of BC and Alberta.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. BC is undergoing a big shift in vaccine supply, and it's signaling good news for the province's overall vaccination timeline. Tanya Fletcher joins us live with the very latest. Tanya, what kinds of changes are we seeing?
It's basically a flip-flopping of the two mRNA vaccines. So shipments of one type are starting to dwindle, while shipments of the other type are now ramping up. So far, Pfizer has been the workhorse driving BC's vaccination effort, but the province is now expecting a decrease in Pfizer shipments, and Moderna is set to pick up the slack instead. Health officials say they will do their best to make sure that both are available at our clinics, but sometimes that simply isn't possible, especially, they predict, in the coming weeks. If you were among the majority who received Pfizer as a first dose, there's a good chance you'll receive Moderna as your second dose. Provincial Health Officer reassures people it is safe and effective to receive either one in combination.
Really, these are the same vaccines. It's the same piece of RNA, the messenger RNA that stimulates your immune system. It's just packaged slightly differently in a slightly different package. And we are confident in the safety and the efficacy of them being used interchangeably.
She says the supply fluctuations will translate to an overall net increase in vaccines this month.
Okay, so what about the AstraZeneca? Where are we at with supply of that vaccine?
There's been a substantial drop-off in the number of British Columbians who've received AstraZeneca ever since the national guidance was changed last week from NACI. It's unclear what BC will do with any remaining AstraZeneca doses it has left over. That'll be especially timely given their looming expiry dates in the coming weeks. But we do have some hard numbers now. There's been a decline of nearly 50% from about 6,000 AstraZeneca shots province-wide, now down to about 3,600 per day.
Before last week, we were about 50-50, where people were making the decision to have a second dose of AstraZeneca or to opt for a Pfizer or Moderna dose. And part of that was because our second dose clinics, our mass clinics, were still being very well subscribed by people who were in the age-based program. So it was easier for many people to get their AstraZeneca dose.
And the province has just surpassed another milestone. More than 1 million British Columbians are now fully vaccinated with both doses. Anita?
Tanya Fletcher live for us tonight. Thanks, Tanya. BC is reporting 56 new cases of COVID-19. That's the lowest weekday number since the middle of last August. 111 patients are currently in hospital, including 41 who are in intensive care. Nearly 78% of adults have received at least a first dose of the vaccine. And there are more vaccine pop-ups happening tonight in Vancouver Coastal Health for people to get their first jab. Anyone 70 plus can also get a second dose. The drop-in clinics are happening at the ICBC Claim Centre in North Vancouver, Vancouver Community College, the Senior Centre at Minoru Centre in Richmond, and the Whistler Conference Centre. People without personal health numbers and those who are not residents of BC are also welcome. Well, the filming of a car commercial rattled many people living in Vancouver's West End awake this morning. The vehicle was being advertised and it was being flown around and around English Bay by two helicopters. As Susanna De Silva reports, some residents did not appreciate the wake-up call.
It's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's a Subaru, carried by a helicopter at around 5:30 this morning.
No, I suddenly woke up. I had a chopper. I was wondering what's happening. Looked out of the window, and then I saw something dangling under the helicopter.
Oh, it just made a ton of racket, and I was going, what the heck's going on? It sounds like an earthquake going on.
The early morning spectacle was still a hot topic of conversation amongst residents this afternoon, many of whom assumed it was a movie, but were surprised no one told them it would be happening.
Well, usually we get a notice in the building saying that there would be something happening, but it didn't happen, so I'm not sure what was going on.
What was happening was the filming of a Subaru commercial, and while many residents were fine to see a car flying outside their window, it was when it took flight that bothered them.
Oh, I think it was too early in the morning for somebody to do something like that.
I don't mind them doing it, but why at that hour of the day? If you want to catch a sunrise in a car, go fly up by Whistler or something. It's not going to bother anybody.
The Vancouver Police Department received a dozen phone calls from people wondering what was happening, while the City of Vancouver was forced to add a recorded message when anyone called 311.
If you're calling to report noise from a helicopter in downtown Vancouver this morning, please be advised no permits were granted by the City of Vancouver. Please contact Transport Canada directly to file a complaint.
Transport Canada confirms it did grant a low flight authorization.
We followed all necessary protocols and received clearance from the City of Vancouver and Transport Canada, including the recommended time to conduct this aerial exercise. We also wish to apologize to anyone we unintentionally disturbed while we were in the area.
Late this afternoon, the city said it doesn't issue permits for filming over water, but had been told residents would not hear it. It says it is following up as to why it appears the flight path changed. Meanwhile, residents are waiting to see how all this will look in a TV ad. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
And a reminder to protect your bike from thieves this summer. Police and Crime Stoppers warn that bike theft isn't just a crime of opportunity, it's an organized criminal enterprise. Thieves are selling stolen high-end bicycles to fences where they can end up shipped across North America. To fight that, police are encouraging people to register their rides online with Project 529, which is an international registry of 1.8 million bikes.
What we've learned with this information is from people using the bikes and reporting their bikes stolen on the app, we can see how organized the bike theft is in Canada and the United States. We have recoveries from as far away as Ottawa. Today we're returning a bike to Edmonton.
Police say working with Project 529 has meant a 40% decrease in bike theft since 2015. Well, from the ice to the boardroom, Henrik and Daniel Sedin are taking on a new challenge after 17 seasons with the Vancouver Canucks. The Twins have been named special advisors to General Manager Jim Benning. The club says the brothers will help with player evaluation and development and work with the team's AHL affiliate, which is moving to Abbotsford. Henrik is the Canucks' all-time points leader, while Daniel has scored the most goals in team history. False Creek is in for a cleaning thanks to 3 new floating trash cans being installed.
The Vancouver plastic cleanup will really be able to work to deepen our knowledge of the plastic pollution problem, both locally and nationally.
The goal is to clean the waterway and study the types of garbage found around Granville Island. The sea bin is essentially a floating trash can that's anchored to the dock, and it scoops up debris in the water. It's part of the Vancouver plastic cleanup pilot, which is hoping to install about 12 sea bins in the next 3 years. Okay, let's bring in meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe now. Joe, very hot. I'm sure lots of people hanging out around Falls Creek. But this isn't even the real thing yet, is it?
Yeah, believe it or not, Anita, this is the warm-up, I'm calling it, to the big heat wave that is still to come for the end of the week. So we've got some marine air moving in for tomorrow and Thursday, cooling things down slightly, still above seasonal, but really appreciate that marine air before things get really hot for the end of the week. I want to start off with a quick look at the current temperatures right now. 22 at YVR. We've broken records across southern BC for a 3rd day in a row. Still looking at a humidex out there. Right now, it feels like a 27, and it is fairly muggy out there. But it is going to get a little cooler and a little less muggy as we get that marine air move in for tomorrow. As I said, though, this is not the main event. We'll be sort of sitting between these two heat domes, these high pressure systems. The first one is moving eastward. You can see that blob of red tracking towards the south. Tomorrow and Thursday will be in between those two blobs. And then check out this red heat dome. It's over the Pacific right now. It's making its way across to us. And by Friday into the weekend, we could be looking at some of the all-time hottest June temperatures we've ever experienced here in BC. Here are some of the numbers to beat. So these are the all-time June records. These numbers not out of the question. Parts of Metro Vancouver could even hit the high 30s, low 40s. This is really a big story for the Pacific Northwest. We'll be challenging those numbers for the interior as well. So I'll take you through a more detailed look at the forecast and what this means for the wildfire risk as well coming up, Anita.
All right, thanks, Joe. And a lot of Slurpee drinking, I'm sure.
Yes, a lot of Slurpee drinking. Good call.
Thanks. Well, gas prices have been climbing across BC since mid-June, but the sticker shock is particularly bad in Victoria right now. The average cost of fuel there has jumped more than 10 cents a litre since Sunday. That's according to price tracker GasBuddy.com. Not what drivers wanted to hear heading into the summer of lowered restrictions.
It doesn't change the actual plans, but it certainly changes the budget.
I was shocked. Thankfully, I had actually just gotten gas 2 days before.
Expensive, but what I can do? Nothing.
Prices in Vancouver have seen their own climb as well, up an average of 5 cents per litre since Friday. And road improvements are in the works for Highway 99, including a new Steveston interchange coming in and out of Richmond. Alongside the interchange, other add-ons include bus on shoulder lanes, a new bus-only connection at Bridgeport Road, and upgraded cycling infrastructure. These plans come in advance of the George Massey Tunnel replacement project. Discussions on a plan and how much that project will cost are still ongoing with the federal government. Well, it started as a project to tackle racism in one grade 6 class in Abbotsford. Now hundreds of students are creating their own equity backpacks in over 70 schools across BC and Alberta. Isabel Regam takes a look at what's inside the backpacks and how the contents are inspiring kids across the country.
These students are carrying the latest backpacks to make a buzz across BC.
This backpack helps us treat people better and to make them feel like they belong.
They're called equity backpacks, and they carry tools to help students tackle racism.
It has a few different things in it, and it's basically just to educate people and bring hope to the world.
In September, Eugene Reimer Middle School teacher Nerleep Sidhu asked each of her grade 6 students to make their own personalized backpack. As the year went on, they filled the bags with classwork from their social studies courses, from artwork to pictures.
This is 2 classmates. His name is Noah and this name is Sideus.
And journal entries.
This is the Martin Luther King quote.
Each carefully chosen items linked to a classroom lesson on racism.
From that point, it really just escalated in such a good, powerful way.
10 months after Sidhu came up with the idea, the backpack project has made its way into more than 70 schools across BC and in one in Alberta. Having recently earned a master's degree in education, Sidhu knew she could help other teachers tackle these heavy topics by sharing her lesson plans and hosting virtual workshops.
It's a topic that sometimes makes people uncomfortable, and educators might be nervous or unsure of a good entry point.
And the project has helped students reflect on their own experiences.
I felt like sad and kind of disappointed.
Balkrin says he's been teased for his long hair and for the pakta he wears.
I feel really glad that we're learning about this in our classroom because this is like part of my history, my parents, my grandparents, and we're trying to build bridges across cultures and not walls.
Ellie has had thoughtful conversations with her dad, who immigrated from Vietnam as a child.
He was the only one that was his culture in school. Then he thought something was wrong with him, and there was something wrong with his culture.
How did that make you feel, hearing about this from your dad?
Made me feel really heartbroken because there's nothing wrong with the culture and you should celebrate it.
While the school year is about to end, the work continues. By next fall, school children coast to coast could be building their own equity backpacks.
Jump!
Isabel Regam, CBC News, Abbotsford.
This week, we are taking a look at some of the Indigenous languages spoken across Vancouver Island and southwestern BC, and the people working hard to save them from extinction. One of those people is an elder with the Cowichan Valley School District. Here's a look at a phrase that she wants us to learn.
Aisquail, and the Kukulenok Tanat, my traditional name, Tanitan at Cooksaila. I'm here at Cooksaila. I'm Dolly Sylvester. I'm here at Cooksaila Reserve. And the word that I wanted to teach you today is ha-ha-smanam. It's ha-ha-smanam. I usually say it 3 times. Ha-ha-smanam. Ha-ha-smanam. That means our sacred children. You know, I bring that word out because of we're always working towards our children, our ha-ha-smanam. We're always looking out for them, everyone, the board office, the staff, the teachers, and that's very important, for everyone to know that how sacred our children are. Every children are sacred. So it's ha-ha-smanam.
A reminder, you can watch this newscast live on CBC Gem. The free app is also where you can find other CBC programs. And we're also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Criticism aimed at the federal government today. Why a new report on sexual misconduct paints a picture of inaction. Next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. A 12-year-old Dartmouth, Nova Scotia student is working hard to protect our ecosystems. As Emma Smith shows us, the youth has cultivated and given away for free hundreds of swamp milkweed plants to help monarch butterflies.
In the heart of downtown Dartmouth, a lush garden is teeming with life. Home to hummingbirds, starlings, and salamanders. It's also a refuge for endangered monarch butterflies. Their survival depends on this unassuming plant. So 12-year-old Vanessa Burchill is growing hundreds of them to give away. She led us around her pollinator paradise recently and asked that we make the plants the star of the show. Milkweed is so important because it's the only plant where monarchs lay their eggs. Vanessa grows swamp milkweed, not common milkweed, the latter being a noxious weed in Nova Scotia that people aren't supposed to plant. The work begins when Vanessa gets a bunch of seeds from the Mersey Tobiatic Research Institute. This year, her growing season began in February. She starts the crop in her living room using a special grow lamp. And when the weather warms up, she moves the tiny seedlings outside into 2 greenhouses. Once they've grown strong enough, she places 4 plants in each pot on her front stoop. Anyone can message her on Facebook and pick one up. Her instructions are pretty simple. Plant the milkweed in a sunny spot at the edge of the garden so the monarchs can spot it.
We can't survive without pollinators, and if no one does anything to help them, then we can't help ourselves.
Vanessa started this project about 3 years ago. Her backyard has since been certified as a wildlife-friendly habitat by the Canadian Wildlife Federation. She's also given away about 1,000 swamp milkweed plants. And with the help of neighbors, she's now started a pollinator garden across the street from her house.
Well, it's very nice to see people who want to help, try and help the monarchs as well. And to know that it's not just us and a couple other people, it's quite a few people.
Only a handful of monarch butterflies have visited her garden since she started. But since Vanessa's project has grown from her home to hundreds of others, she knows her quest to save the endangered species is working. Emma Smith, CBC News, Dartmouth.
Great project there. Okay, stick with us. We'll be back in a few moments with what's making headlines across Canada and the rest of the world. And we'll also have an interview with Dr. Srinivas Murthy on the latest COVID situation in BC and get his thoughts. Canada's military ombudsman says the issue of sexual misconduct in the armed forces is moving from crisis to tragedy. His report accuses the Defence Minister's office of trying to exert control over investigations. And as Ashley Burke tells us, recommendations for change are being ignored.
It is clear that inaction is rewarded far more than action.
Blistering criticism from Canada's military ombudsman aimed at the government and the military's top brass over its handling of sexual misconduct.
The erratic behavior of leadership defies common sense or reason. The concept of ministerial accountability has been absent.
His position paper accuses Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan's office of trying to exert control over investigations, placing reports on hold and delaying their publication and availability to the public. He said, "We have also seen an action on sensitive information that could be unflattering to the Canadian Armed Forces and Department."
When leaders turn a blind eye to our recommendations and concerns in order to advance political interests and their own self-preservation or career advancement, it is the members of the defense community that suffer these consequences.
Lick is calling for the Ombudsman's office to be made entirely independent and report to Parliament, not the Minister's office, something his predecessors have long called for.
I produced 14 systemic reviews on issues inside the Canadian Armed Forces. The responses I got back from the Minister were inane, absent, missing, off the mark.
The past ombudsman says nothing will change without true independence.
This is why ombudsmen get upset. They're doing the same thing day after day, trying to get the elephant to roll over, and it's just not happening.
The Prime Minister is promising change and said the government's appointed former Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour to lead an external review into the sexual misconduct crisis.
I know she will be looking, as will I, very carefully at Mr. Lick's report to see how we can make sure that the Ombudsman's office is a key part of the solution.
Lick's position paper contains legislation already written that he wants tabled in Parliament to make his office more independent. The Conservatives say they support it. The Department of National Defence said it's reviewing the documentation. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Convicted killer and serial rapist Paul Bernardo has lost his second bid to be released on parole. It's a decision welcomed by the families of his victims.
I think what most disturbing for the families at this point is that, I mean, even before today's hearing, you've heard them say consistently that subjecting them to a parole hearing for someone like Paul Bernardo every 2 years is really difficult and gut-wrenching for them.
Bernardo is serving life sentence for the deaths of 2 teenage girls, Leslie Mahaffey, who was tortured and killed in June of 1991, and Kristen French, who was held captive and then killed in April of 1992. Bernardo, now 56, was convicted in 1995. He's been eligible for full parole for more than 3 years now and planned, if granted, to move to Kelowna. Relatives of his victims say he should never be released from prison. Their lawyer also says the parole board should consider not holding parole hearings in the same month that one of the murders took place. The idea of unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, evokes a sense of mystery for many, but also mockery. There have been numerous accounts of unexplained sightings in the skies, and some were credible enough to prompt the U.S. government to investigate them. As Katie Simpson tells us, a much-anticipated report may soon offer some clarity.
We're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
Top secret investigations into sightings of unidentified flying objects have been going on for years behind closed doors at the Pentagon. But even with the U.S. military putting some of its brightest minds on these cases, there's no clear answer yet as to what these things in the sky may be. Sightings including this one captured on video by Navy pilots in 2015 during training exercises off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. The former lead investigator looking into these mysterious events is asking the public to keep an open mind.
This is a conversation that may lead us down a road that may turn out it's not of human origin.
There are 2 leading theories as to what these things may be. Either something potentially alien that's from another world, Or it could be an adversary, China or Russia, leapfrogging past U.S. aerospace capabilities. The unclassified report, which must be presented to lawmakers by Friday, is expected to rule out that pilots have accidentally stumbled upon secret American government technology. Retired astronaut Colonel Chris Hadfield, who was also a fighter pilot and a test pilot, says the videos are interesting, but he is certain the objects are not from outer space.
It just makes no sense at all. You know, that intelligent life from somewhere we have no idea. It's obviously not from our solar system because we've had a good look at every planet so far, could cross interstellar space. And they wouldn't try and, communicate with anybody. They would just sneak around and only be caught on strange-looking video by some fighter pilots. It doesn't pass any basic sniff test of logic.
The report is not expected to draw any firm conclusions as to what exactly those pilots saw in the sky, but it has changed the official conversation around UFOs. With the military taking these reports seriously, lawmakers are demanding greater transparency while also calling it a national security issue because these unexplained objects have been spotted in American airspace when they shouldn't be there. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Coming up, we sit down with infectious disease expert Dr. Srinivas Murthy to talk about the COVID response, where we are, where we're going, and what still has the doctor worried. Next.
The initial word came last night, and today the confirmation. The British Columbia government will protect a unique area of wilderness and wildlife. The Tashanshini watershed will become a provincial park, covering 1 million hectares in the farthest northwest corner of the province. Today's decision means a mine plan for Windy Craggy Mountain will not go ahead, and one of the most important watersheds in North America will be preserved. Our environment specialist, Eve Savory, on the outrage and the elation.
The world's newest and largest international protected area is a wild place of ice and snow, of alpine flowers and of whitewater rafting, and of large creatures that need a lot of turf. As of today, they've got it. For the new provincial park combines with the Yukon's Kluhani and 2 Alaskan parks to make a protected area of 8.5 million hectares, a controversial protected area.
We will continue working with BC's mining industry to pursue new mine projects around this province.
That's the mining industry, and it is furious. This mountain, Windy Craggy, is rich in copper and gold. Getty's Resources wanted to develop an open-pit mine here. Environmentalists, however, said the sulfuric acid formed in extracting the ore could escape its holding area and devastate the Tashanshini River. They are ecstatic.
Tashanshini is of the quality of the Grand Canyon, and we have just protected something in this province which is going to be valued for generations.
But industry says the deposit at Windy Craggy is worth some $8.5 billion.
Getty's will be demanding compensation of several $100 million, and we will state our amount after we've discussed it with our accountants and our attorneys.
Why would an NDP government make a decision that will cost 2,000 construction jobs, 500 permanent jobs, and a healthy take in taxes? Well, some say it was trying to regain environmental credibility after allowing logging in the old-growth forests of Clayoquot Sound. Whatever the reason, the mining industry says it's paying.
It's fine for you in the Lower Mainland. All you have to do is go to McDonald's and send your laundry out. Somebody has to make real jobs, create real wealth, or we're going down the tube.
The mining industry is predicting a big chill in BC investment. But the government says the decision had nothing to do with mining. It says it was a unique opportunity to preserve a unique area forever. Eve Savory, CBC News, Vancouver.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. West End residents were startled from their beds early this morning by the sound of helicopters, only to find a chopper pulling a car for a commercial shoot. Now those living in the area are upset it was allowed to happen so early. There are several pop-up clinics tonight in Vancouver Coastal Health so you can get your first vaccine dose. The clinics are in North Vancouver at the ICBC Claim Centre on Lloyd, Vancouver Community College, and in Richmond at the Minaroo Centre.
We are confident in the safety and the efficacy of them being used interchangeably.
And BC is running out of Pfizer supply, but the province says there's more Moderna arriving than initially expected. This does mean some people who got Pfizer or AstraZeneca first will now get Moderna as their second. And the Delta COVID variant is also sweeping through the UK, where researchers say they're seeing milder symptoms, but it may not be because of the variant itself. As Lauren Pelly explains, the new symptoms could change Canada's testing strategy.
In the UK, where vaccinations and reopening efforts are further along, researchers behind a COVID tracking app have noticed a change.
Since the start of May, we've been looking at the top symptoms in all the app users, and they're not the same as they were.
A headache, sore throat, and runny nose are now the most reported symptoms, all milder than a fever or cough, which round out the top 5. People are sneezing more often too. Some experts think it's because most of the infected people are under 40 and less likely to be vaccinated.
It's more like a bad cold in this younger population. Just have a seat here.
Those shifting symptoms could change how we track COVID in the future.
And what are your symptoms?
So I basically have like mild cold symptoms, sore throat, congestion, headache.
Toronto resident Jessica De Silva is getting tested just to be sure, but others with a mild illness might not bother. This testing clinic has its lowest level of appointments since the pandemic started.
Most of the people that we get, it's mandatory for work. Healthcare workers, private caregivers.
We're going to miss cases.
Some experts warn public health should refocus testing efforts to be more targeted, including in schools, since children under 12 can't get a vaccine just yet.
It's an important piece to redeploy testing into unvaccinated areas and use it as a tool there for control as compared to just expecting anyone who wants a test to go get a test.
Catching cases remains a priority since many Canadians could still fall seriously ill from COVID-19, even if others only have mild symptoms. That means testing anyone who might be infected, whether they know it or not. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Now, as we mentioned earlier, here in BC, cases of COVID-19 have dropped significantly. Just 56 reported today. So this, of course, is a good time to do a check-in with infectious disease expert Dr. Srinivas Murthy. Always good to have you on our show. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, Anita.
Okay, so I want to start with the border. A lot of people pushing for a full reopening. The feds are taking a slower approach. What's your sense of what should be done given things are worse there than they are here?
Well, they're worse there, but not by much. I think their vaccination rollout has started earlier, and they're at about 50% having 2 vaccines. And so I think in a staged, cautious way, opening the border is a reasonable approach. And there's been recommendations from a number of task groups as to how to do that, say with fully vaccinated people not requiring quarantine, partially vaccinated people requiring a test, and so on. That should and could be integrated to help open that border, to help restore economies and tourisms.
A lot of people wanting to travel across to the U.S. Would you travel out of the country anytime soon?
I'll follow the public health orders and make sure that I follow the rules accordingly. I am traveling during the summer within Canada and looking forward to seeing my family across the country.
Nice. Here in BC, we are opening up quite a bit. The next phase is in less than 2 weeks. So do you think all of this is happening prematurely given the Delta variant and others, or is this the right move heading into summer?
I think knowing where we are with our vaccination rate, and I want to congratulate British Columbia for doing such a great job at getting to the place we are. We have a long way to go. We want to get everyone as much as possible vaccinated. But that being said, I think we're in a place where opening up is a reasonable thing to do. And so that July 1st, phase 3, will obviously leave it to Dr. Henry and her team to make those decisions. But I think we're on track to head in that direction.
Okay, speaking of Dr. Henry, today at our news conference, lots of talk about mix and match vaccines. Let's focus on the AstraZeneca. Since the NACI recommendation to avoid taking a second dose of AZ, instead choosing an mRNA shot, the number of people getting AstraZeneca in BC has dropped by quite a bit. What do you think about this, and what do you recommend?
So I think the preferred vaccine per NACI, with the second dose being the mRNA, is a good strategy based on the Delta variant and knowing that the marginal amount of protection that it offers. That being said, AstraZeneca is a great second dose as well. And so I think getting the first vaccine that you can get is the recommendation that I would give to anybody at this point.
Okay, so lots of positive talk, lots of good news right now. Is there anything still keeping you awake at night when it comes to COVID?
Like looking internationally and seeing what's happening, I think places like the UK have always been a bellwether for what's happening in British Columbia, and seeing that they're having a small surge, not necessarily a surge in hospitalizations, but a surge in cases that's caused by this Delta variant that may happen in Canada as well. Hopefully it's a small blip or a surge or some term like that, and nothing more major than that. And obviously watching the rest of the world, knowing that the pandemic is still raging in parts of the world like Africa and South America, and making sure we direct our attention there so that new variants don't emerge and that we save the most amount of lives.
Absolutely. Dr. Srinivasmurthy, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Have a great evening.
A town in Quebec is cleaning up after a tornado touched down. It left a scene of devastation and tragedy as well. The latest next. And at 6:36, you are looking at a live shot of North Vancouver. Boy, it was hot today, but there's a lot more heat on the way. Johanna breaks it down, and she'll tell us when it's going to get here and how hot it's going to get next. People in Mascouche, Quebec are cleaning up today after a tornado tore through a residential neighborhood. One man was killed and a number of homes have been badly damaged. Alison Northcott is in the town, about 45 kilometers north of Montreal.
People in this neighborhood are dealing with the aftermath of the tornado that ripped through this neighborhood yesterday. People say that it came on quickly and suddenly, and it left a terrible mark. One man in his 60s was killed. We heard today from his neighbor and friend who was with him moments before.
Instead to go directly inside, we like, we are very impressed by that because we never see that before. So we stay there instead to go home. And when we realize, then it come on this way with all the pieces and it blew everywhere in the air. So it's too late. I just have time to go to my home and maybe 5 seconds less, and I don't have time to go to my home.
Across this neighborhood, you can see scenes like this with damaged homes, fallen trees, and power lines. Over here, there's a home that was under construction, and the winds were so strong that it blew the home right off of its foundation. Environment Canada says the tornado traveled for 3 kilometers with winds of up to 220 kilometers per hour. The mayor says the cleanup will take time because the damage is extensive. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Mascouche, Quebec.
Scary stuff, Johanna. What more are we learning today about this tornado?
So, Anita, Environment Canada and a research team from Western University were on the ground today assessing the damage, and that is how we rate tornadoes based on the damage. So this one being rated as an EF2. I've got a picture to show you exactly where that tornado touched down yesterday. And as Allison mentioned, that's over the 200 kilometer per hour mark. Our enhanced Fujita scale goes from 0 to 5. Most Canadian tornadoes are in the 0 to 2 range. So this is on the upper end of the tornadoes we get. Only 6% of Canadian tornadoes are higher than that EF2 rating. But I was tracking that storm yesterday, and these cells popped up ahead of the main cold front. So while Environment Canada had a severe thunderstorm watch, they talked about the risk of rotation through the day. These ones really just popped up out of nowhere northeast of Montreal. It is summer severe weather, though, in eastern Canada, and luckily a much quieter today for cleanup on that side of the country. Very different story, of course, on the west side. We are under a heat dome. As we head into the end of the week, as we mentioned earlier, this is severe weather, though. We are going to be talking about an extended hot period really beginning Friday for southern BC. A quick snapshot of the fire danger rating today across the province. It is creeping up very steadily. We had no pockets of extreme yesterday. Already starting to see some areas approach that extreme level. This is when we get to extreme, that means new fires can start very quickly and spread very easily. But with no real lightning in the forecast, we have a few strikes overnight tonight and through Cranbrook and up through the Peace. Most new fires, if any, will be started by humans. So BC Wildfire asking people to really keep that in mind over the next few days. A little bit of a break across the province as we get some marine air between the two heat domes. 32 and through Kelowna, still above seasonal by a good 5 degrees and through the south. Notice the cloud cover from Williams Lake up towards Prince George. A much more comfortable day for most of the province. And we're actually catching some rain in through the northern half. Temperatures will stay above seasonal, but not oppressive through Thursday. So check out these afternoon highs. 34 and through Soyuz for Wednesday, coming down a little bit for Thursday. You can see that 27 out towards Abbotsford. So it's hot, but not like the heat we're going to get into for Friday. So this is a snapshot of YVR's forecast. Not out of the question that we'll be hitting the 30s for the weekend. And Anita, for inland areas, including the valley, we could be talking 3 consecutive days of 40 degrees for places like Abbotsford. So start thinking about your cool place and your cool drink, because we're going to need both.
Well, I told the family in Abbotsford they're going to have to come out here to visit to stay cool. So
and tell them to bring the fans. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, scientists and a BC First Nation are studying the effect of a landslide near Butte Inlet. The slide carved a path through the landscape with the force of an earthquake, destroying trees and habitats. Briar Stewart joined investigators.
It all happened very quickly.
It's an up-close look at what's left behind.
Pretty devoid of vegetation.
After part of a BC mountain came crashing down into the lake and valley below.
You look up on those trees, you can see scars.
Scientists are still trying to piece together why, but they have a very good idea of how it unfolded. Back in November, when the rock gave way, the force was the equivalent of a 4.9 magnitude earthquake.
The landslide took about 30 seconds to reach the lake.
Landslide expert Martin Gertsema says more than 18 million cubic meters barreled down the slope,
which is the equivalent of about 2 million dump truck loads releasing at once. And if you convert it to tonnage, it's about the equivalent of all the cars in Canada coming down the hill at once.
That's quite the image.
Hitting the bottom of the valley in 30 seconds and then causing this enormous tsunami and outburst flood.
They believe the wave was more than 100 meters high. It ripped up trees and stripped the landscape as it tore through Elliott Creek. This map shows what happened as all the debris and sediment was pushed toward the Southgate River.
See, there's material coming off the slope.
We were along as scientists took a closer look. Brian Menounis is with the University of Northern British Columbia.
Keep your eyes up there.
The mountainside is still unstable, and they believe the melting glacier here likely contributed to the slide.
We have lots of glaciers that are retreating rapidly due to climate change. And in doing so, they set up these situations where we have these steep slopes which can unfortunately suddenly fail.
In this case, the slide was in a remote area off the coast of BC. Fortunately, no one was around, but the landscape has been severely impacted.
Do you need more water?
Yeah.
A team from the Hawkeye Institute had been doing water sampling in this area and ramped up testing after the landslide.
760.8.
What they found was that particularly over the winter, there was a big spike in turbidity in the river. When fish are exposed to very turbid water for a long period of time, it can be harmful, even fatal. As for Elliott Creek, the landslide moved it 800 meters. In the months since, it's moved twice more.
Pretty big spikes in turbidity.
Ian Giesbrecht is an ecosystem scientist who's been studying the impact on the water and the creek.
And each time it moves, that's changing the habitat that's available in there for fish, and it's sending a pulse of sediment out into the river. So the whole system up there, it's about 400 hectares, or an area about the size of Stanley Park in Vancouver, that's exposed sediment. It's just waiting for gravity and water to move it downstream.
This area is part of the traditional territory of the Hamalko First Nation.
It's good to see you all here.
They too are trying to assess the slide's impact.
The work that's going to be done here is caring for the salmon and the lands and keep us all safe.
It's not just about looking at the creek and the river, but also where the watershed drains into the ocean. We took a 2-hour boat trip up Butte Inlet with members of the First Nation.
And we're going into the traditional territory of the Hamalko people.
It's an area rich with natural beauty and wildlife.
There's Mama. See the tail?
But the salmon population here has been in decline, which is why Eric Blaney is particularly concerned about the landslide. He's coordinating the response for the Hamalko First Nation.
It was reported to be 90 to 100% of the salmon habitat has been lost from Elliott Creek all the way down to the estuary. So that habitat is really crucial for those early run chum and for those coho who are wintering there. That's a crisis for us. That's an emergency.
Hamalko already runs a salmon hatchery, and when we visited, they were releasing thousands of juvenile fish into the inlet. The First Nation not only relies on the fish for food, but the salmon run attracts grizzly bears, which in turn attracts tourists for Hamalko's wildlife tours.
Coho and I believe Chinook.
Hamalko Chief Darren Blaney says the First Nation wants to monitor to see how many fish are returning to the landslide area. He says with so much debris being dislodged at the base of the creek, the habitat could be impacted for years.
I think we're going to have to go in there and help them out to make sure that they have a place to rear.
But creating new channels for the fish would be an expensive proposition. and a challenging one considering the landscape is still unstable. One of the goals here is to better understand how the environment responds to events like this, along with a clearer picture of just how such a destructive slide was triggered in the first place. Briar Stewart, CBC News, near Butte Inlet, BC.
Coming up, with warm weather, there will be plenty of garden growth. How to keep the weeds at bay. We have some gardening tips next.
When you love yourself, when you truly accept yourself and you truly embrace who you really are, it radiates to the outside. People see that. And in a way, you're inspired to do the things you truly love. You're inspired to reach for the things you really want, and nothing is going to stop you. I started TikTok just for fun. It was at the beginning of the pandemic. And I wanted something entertaining, something for fun, something to just keep my mind a little bit occupied. One of my very first videos that I posted was of me just combing out my natural Afro kinky hair to one of the trending songs at the time.
All right, this is for you, especially if you belong in the LGBTQ+ community. Please stand up and speak up for transgender women, especially transgender women of color.
It wasn't until during the Black Lives Matter movement. And that's when I realized there was this lacking of representation of Black transgender women. When you're Black, you're affected with racism, regardless of your gender identity, regardless of who your background. All of those things come, they intersect. When you're Black and you're out there and you exist as yourself, you pursue the things that you truly like, the things that you truly love, and at the same time embracing who you are, embracing your Blackness. I think that is a very simple definition of Black excellence. I am opening more space, for Black transgender women.
Everybody is loved.
I was reached out by TikTok Canada. They reached out to me, and I was informed through them that I've been chosen as one of the Black TikTok trailblazers. When I read the email, I was like, what? I kind of had to look twice. As a kid, I was very shy, timid, because I was bullied a lot. I was different compared to many other kids. It was very hard. People would always say well, you're acting like a girl. You should act like, be more manly, be whatever. I wasn't that person. I wasn't a man. I wasn't a boy. I wasn't male. I knew that I was different. It is very important that for younger kids, younger transgender, non-binary people to be able to see themselves on bigger screens. Myself as a transgender woman, I did not have that privilege growing up. I did not. And I always thought how nice it would have been to be able to see someone who's like me, just living their lives, being unapologetically themselves.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC Vancouver is a proud returning sponsor of the Talking Stick Festival, the largest multidisciplinary Indigenous arts festival of its kind in North America. Get your tickets today at fullcircle.ca. And never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox and keep connected with us.
Well, with this hot, sunny weather, you might be thinking about getting outside into the garden. But did you know there's one simple gardening task that is commonly overlooked, Anita?
Yes, horticulturist and edible garden consultant Christina Chung braved the early January showers to show us how covering your soil can help your plants grow.
Hi, I'm Christina Chung, and I'm a horticulturist here in rainy Vancouver. Today we're in my garden, and I want to show you something that's super beneficial that many gardeners don't think about. Even before we enter the prime growing season, we as gardeners have probably thought about how to give our plants the best chance at success. We tend to our seedlings or buy the healthiest plants, and also make sure we have supplies and tools on hand for the growing season. But did you know that there's one item that oftentimes doesn't make it onto the checklist? I'm talking about covering the soil, and it could be with mulch or with living plants, just something that acts as a blanket on top of the soil surface.
A light physical barrier on top of the garden beds and containers not only helps lessen the evaporation from the soil in the hotter months, it also prevents erosion from wind, water, like during heavy rains or when we overhead water, and also compaction from our feet.
Another huge benefit is weed suppression. So this beautiful dense mat of creeping thyme prevented weed seeds from landing and germinating. I don't have to do any weeding here, which is great. This adjacent area had exposed soil. Weed seeds landed, germinated, and now I have a lot of weeding to do. Have you ever tried to water a thirsty plant in your garden bed or a container and noticed the water sliding right off of the surface? If so, then you may need to look into mulching.
There's likely a dry crust on top of the soil, which is preventing the water from actually infiltrating or entering the soil and reaching your plant's roots. And this is not good. One simple way to prevent this is by mulching or growing ground covers so that the crust doesn't form.
So what are some options for covering the soil? Well, one of the more common, effective, and free types of mulch are leaves.
If you have access to leaves, collect them and use them. The best leaves to look for are the ones that are small, like the size of your palm, and also pliable. The smaller size is much easier to apply and also breaks down through the season faster to contribute amazing organic matter into your soil.
Straw is a wonderful material, and it's used a lot in food gardens. It's a lightweight material that's perfect for working around the base of crops. Now, with all of these loose materials, you have to keep in mind that you want to create the blanket on top of the soil. You don't want to mix it into the actual soil.
One of my favorite ways to cover the soil is by using living plants. Low-growing perennials like creeping thymes, sedum, strawberry, ajuga, and other ground-hugging plants make excellent covers. You can even design a patchwork, all knitted together, over time to suppress the weeds and also add a lot of interest and beauty to your garden.
If you're a food gardener, and especially if you garden in containers, here's a really fun, easy, and simple way to grow your edible ground cover. Just sow a whole bunch of baby greens, like this kale and mustard here. For me, these are a bit too big. I'm gonna harvest them and then sprinkle a new layer of seeds. They're gonna germinate really quickly, and within 2 weeks, I'm gonna get a new layer of edible ground cover. So when would you apply mulch? Anytime, really. But if you're planting plants into your garden right now, you can mulch with something quick, like leaves, so you can start getting the benefits of covering your soil.
Just make sure to leave an inch or so around the base of the plant.
So what if you just sowed a whole bunch of springtime veggies like greens and carrots? Instead of smothering the emerging seedlings, wait until they actually peek out of the soil and then apply the mulch around the base, like what I did with these carrots. In our climate, there's always a window of opportunity to introduce new plants into the garden, including perennial ground covers like this beautiful creeping thyme. Remember, with that protective blanket on top of the soil, you'll see fewer weeds, happier, more hydrated plants, less erosion from the wind and the rain, and also beauty if you opt for perennial plants. Thanks for joining me in my garden today, and happy gardening.
So there were some really good tips there, Anita. I realized I did a lot wrong when working on my very sad vegetable garden. Yeah, that is now basically a dandelion farm back there. Did you manage to do any better with yours this season?
So I think I did a little bit better. I do have one cherry tomato coming out.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I've got a little bit of bok choy, but the rest of it, it's let's just say you wouldn't think I'm a farmer's daughter.
There's always next year, and I hope you enjoy your one salad.
Sorry, I missed that.
I hope you enjoy your one salad you get out of it.
Oh, absolutely. Me, Anya, and Jot are going to split that tomato 3 ways.
Nice.
Thanks, Joe. And you can always find our news program online, cbc.ca/BC. Dan Bird is here.